Hello and welcome to the November Look-See. It's still a busy, crazy world out there, and I hope you're making your way through the days with some common sense and some clarity and, minimum of difficulty in spite of the fact that we just started Mercury retrograde a few days ago. So, keep your head on. There was no single theme this month, although there was one question that kept coming up in different forms that had to do with, do we need government? What kind? How much? So you'll hear that throughout. A lot of focus still on what's happening, with our government. So let's begin. Number one, back in February of this year, at the very beginning of this year, I wrote what I saw happening over the coming year. This, I think, was the look-see from February. And what I wrote was, quote, "From now until this fall, there's frantic talk in DC about money. The bubble is bursting, and the people of DC who thought they were insulated from what was happening to the rest of the population are terribly upset. It looks like before we ever get to the end of the fiscal year, things begin shutting down." And they did, here and there. As I watched the two sides, Democrat and Republican, it looked like a Mexican standoff. The Democrats were refusing to agree to things like the budget, some of Trump's cabinet picks, or the signing of some legislation. Trump's attitude was, fine, we will just shut things down at a faster rate. By the end of the fiscal year, a lot of programs that had been dishing out money were gone. The people who were being paid with that money were out of work. And blame was flying in every direction. Earlier in the year, the federal government had shut down a few things and then a few more things. And by September, October, more and more was being shut down. People were fighting and suing over the loss of these programs. Others were fighting the Democrats or the Republicans. Some were going after the people who took money fraudulently. And some were fighting with leftover illegal immigrants and gangs. The whole nation was breaking apart. People realized that the swamp had been holding the nation together using payola to keep people quiet and in place. Hardly anyone realizes, however, that it is the United States of America Corporation that is breaking up. And because of this, people never reconstitute the republic in its old form. Trump maintains continuity of government as the U.S. corporation breaks apart, and it looks like the COG, Continuity of Government Group, helps reorganize and hold the new federation together until it stabilizes. End quote. So here we are in November, and I could probably write the same thing again and be spot on. Number two, Russia recently tested its nuclear-armed and nuclear-powered Burevestnik missile, successfully flying it around in the sky for over 15 hours, covering 14,000 kilometers. OMG. Putin then reminded NATO in a very matter-of-fact way that Russia has unconventional innovations in its arsenal, which is quite the understatement. The Russians are the first country in the world to produce a miniature nuclear power plant that can be put into a missile or anything, and that is a game changer. Putin's message to NATO carried the unspoken message that the Europeans should not provoke Russia, or there could be a seriously disproportionate response. Russia intends to keep the Burevestnik missile in reserve to be used only in extreme cases, as if an enemy missile were to strike deep inside Russian territory, said retired Indian Air Force Captain Uttam Kumar Devnath. Quote, strategically speaking, the development of this little nuclear power plant will have a great influence on the way the US or NATO countries think about Russia, because the Burevestnik can target any part of the world, circumventing all US air and missile defense systems. Among the key characteristics of the Burevestnik are an evasive flight path and very low altitude flight, giving it radar evading power, Devnath stressed. As it flies at a low level and changes course often, the American or NATO defense systems will fall flat in tracking and neutralizing this weapon. So when I read this, it reminded me of the attitude of many, many ET groups. They research and develop very powerful defense weapons for the singular reason that such weapons deter others from attacking, not because they want to go and attack. It's because they want others to know, don't bother us, leave us alone. Number 3, OpenAI and Amazon have agreed to a $38 billion deal over the coming 7 years. NVIDIA is also making deals and has been allowed to ship 60,000 NVIDIA chips to United Arab Emirates, where Microsoft is going to spend $5.5 billion on data centers. Together, Microsoft, Google, Meta, and Amazon will spend $500 billion next year on AI, 30% more than their 2025 investments. So I look at those sums of money and what they are investing in, and I can't help wondering what $500 billion would do to feed hungry people, make sure they have a roof over their head, new shoes if they need them, a phone in their pocket, clean water to drink, and some means to get around, whether that's a car, a truck, a bicycle, or even a horse and buggy. We could then talk about good education, good health, and the arts and sciences. We might even be able to leave government out of the conversation. When everyone is well taken care of, do we need government? Probably. But what kind of government? How big? And what would it be responsible for doing if everything is taken care of? So I have more to say about AI a bit later, but let's move on. Number 4. As I write this, our government is about to reopen, I think, after being shut down for 6 weeks. As the days dragged on, I would worry one day, is it ever going to reopen? And the next day I would end up thinking, well, we might not need a government at all. Questions that still linger include, we have only funded things till the end of January, a couple months. Why? Why only for a few months? Do we have to go through this again? What if it closes down and doesn't reopen? Do we really need it? Do we need government? What is government doing for us these days? Could we just keep going with our economy and skip the government? So the US has had 2 economies running side by side for a long time. On one side, we have the central banks, the stocks, bonds, big investments by big investors. And on the other side, we have the Main Street economy, which is the true heart of the real economy. Both economies seem to mostly ignore the shutdown as if government were irrelevant. However, I would bet that the central bankers will have a lot more difficulty recovering than Main Street. Main Street is much more nimble. Number 5. The head of the Russian Direct Investment Fund, Kirill Dmitriev, stated on X, this is a quote, "The European Union and the United Kingdom have invested more than 100 billion euros in weapons for Ukraine. This amount would have been sufficient to safely repatriate almost all illegal immigrants in the EU and Britain to their home countries, while allocating more than 34,000 euros to each for voluntary return and reintegration." Wow. He explained that the number of illegal immigrants in the European Union and Britain is approximately 3.4 million people. And the actual cost of safely repatriating them is estimated at around 34 billion euros, including 10,000 euros for each person for voluntary return and reintegration. Dmitriev added that the amount spent on weapons is more than 3 times the amount needed to return all these immigrants to their home country. Wow. Number 6. You've often heard me say that I'm watching Trump like a hawk. And every month it seems like a million questions come up around what is he doing and why? So in my July 2025 look-see, I said there were 4 possibilities unfolding around Trump. One was betrayal. It's possible that he's betraying the U.S. The second was, well, maybe he made some mistakes and he's trying to fix them. The third was that maybe he's a puppet and somebody else is pulling the strings. And the fourth was that he was trying to break the back of the globalists by creating deliberate contradictions and confusion, thus preventing them from putting together a workable strategy to combat him. I have leaned toward that fourth explanation for a long time. Right from the start, my intuition said that Trump was working with Putin and Xi Jinping to break the globalist grip, and that the 3 of them formed a team, like a 3-corner triangle team that had the globalists in their crosshairs. They were also working to move their individual countries ahead in a competitive way with one another. So I still lean in that direction. But I was really surprised to read a comment by Burning Bright, who's a contributor to Badlands, the Badlands Media Substack. And Burning Bright said, "What we are witnessing is a mutual choreographed unwind between the US, China, and Russia. And that choreographed unwind is a pincer of tariffs, export bans, and reshoring that purges globalist entanglements on all sides." So I'm not the only one seeing that. Looks like they're trying to reestablish sovereignty over their own countries and get away from the globalist stuff, globalist ideas, and we'll say globalist enthusiasts. Number 7. In the past year, I've gone up, down, and around and through an entire set of thoughts about Donald Trump. Some comments I've made have been supportive. Some have been warnings or doubtful about where we're headed. But now a full year has passed since he was elected. And regardless of the chaos, the confusion, whatever mistakes might have been made, sudden changes, failures, it looks like Trump is still moving in the direction of at least trying to drain the swamp get out of the clutches of the deep state, and prevent the U.S. from becoming a failed nation. So I would guess that the task has been a little more than he expected, and the attempted assassinations were probably quite humbling, but he's still up at bat and he keeps on swinging. So obviously he is not giving up or backing down. However, I think there's an important question that every single person in the West needs to ask themselves and then answer honestly. And the question is, do you still want to have a nation? If that answer is yes, then the next question is, do you want that to be the fill in the blank, the nation that you are currently a citizen of? If the answer is yes, then the next question becomes, are you living, talking, and working to help your nation make it through this period? Well, what if the answer to that first question is no, that you are not interested in being part of a nation? Then the next question would be, okay, what have you done to reorganize, lead, and stabilize the population that you are part of? If your answer is nothing, well, then I would ask, well, are you an anarchist or just a rebellious, destructive idiot? If you then said, well, I don't know what to do, then I would ask, well, then what makes you think that you can survive without the structures and supports of a nation? So what if your answer to that first question of whether you still wanted to have a nation was yes, but I don't want the corruption that I see going on in this nation? Then it's time for you to look at all the ways you have supported the development and workings of that corruption. How many times did you look the other way? Tell yourself, oh, that's none of my business. Or pretend that things were okay because the corruption hadn't touched you personally. How often did you excuse your inaction by saying, it's not my problem? How many letters did you write to congressmen or make calls to officials? How much effort have you made to get to know the people running your town or city? How many times did you tell yourself, well, I don't have time for that, or this meeting, or whatever, because you're too tired or too busy to watch video news, read announcements, the newspaper, or listen to reports of what was happening in your city? This is how corruption starts. And this is how it becomes entrenched. It's because no one is minding the store. No one is watching or seems to care. Number 8. Over the past month, while watching the shutdown, I kept thinking, wow, it looks like the Democrats are so intent on destroying Donald Trump that they're willing to risk destroying the entire country. That thought surprised me every time it came up. But in looking at the history of the Democrats, they have been acting as if they were trying to destroy America for years. So why should I be surprised? The shutdown lasted 6 weeks, and my personal observation was that they probably, this was before we got the agreement to reopen, that they probably would not reopen until after the election because they were hoping to see a lot of Democrat gains in that election. And they would then hurry to reopen in order to cement their gains. It appears that they are finally willing to reopen, but I'm doubtful that they have any future in the world of politics because of their awful decision-making. In addition, ordinary Americans are just not willing to pay taxes only to see their hard-earned money spent on illegals who are getting food, housing, education, medical care, the right to vote, and spending money. Without the votes from those millions of illegals, without the corrupt, transgender, open border, two-tiered justice system and policies that send billions of dollars to other countries, I just don't know that the Democrats can even survive. Are we in for a political tsunami over the next few years? Number 9. When I began this look-see, arguments were raging about whether food stamp money, that's SNAP, food stamp money could be paid out using money from tariffs and contingency funds. Personally, I think this demand leaves the government between a rock and a hard place. We might be able to come up with the money, but who's going to administer it and take care of the paperwork? That's how money goes missing. My earlier years as an engineer and many years as a farmer have consistently reinforced the need to be practical and realistic. Life requires that we do what is needed and not waste time with excuses or complaining. It's hard to teach this to children, and I worry that nobody was ever there to teach the many people now on food stamps. You know, it all reminds me of my life with my children and grandchildren when we were all here on the farm. When it was time to work in the garden on hot days, my 9-year-old grandson was full of excuses. His mother made him come out to work under protest, but after 5 minutes, he needed to go to the bathroom. 20 minutes later, he came back from his trip to the bathroom, worked another 5 minutes, and then needed to go get a drink of water. Frequently, he decided he needed to change to a different shirt, or maybe he needed to go get some sunscreen. When he came back, he'd work half-heartedly, talking constantly and distracting everyone. After 15 minutes, he'd say, "I think it's time for a break. I'll go make some lemonade." And he would disappear into the kitchen and then reappear 20 minutes later with a tray holding a pitcher of lemonade and glasses for everyone. After the lemonade break, he would say, "I'll take these back to the kitchen." And by the time he reappeared, the work was done. It was time to come inside. This became his pattern, and it came down to me finally getting pretty fiercely blunt with him. Look, no work, no food. If you want to eat, you have to help with the work. I wonder if any of the people on food stamps have ever run up against that kind of statement or fierce reality. No work, no food. Because it's that kind of statement coming from someone who cares that makes a difference in life. So if I were on food stamps these days, I'll tell you what, I would be reading the writing on the wall and beginning to move in a direction that would lead to becoming food self-sufficient. This kind of government shutdown is going to come again. Even a few grow bags of tomatoes and potatoes on a sunny porch or balcony will produce enough food to feed you for a couple of weeks. Number 10. The Supreme Court heard arguments recently in the case of VOS selections versus President Donald Trump. The case was brought by a group of small businesses who are saying that Trump's use of emergency powers to levy tariffs against trading partners is illegal, and only Congress has the right to levy tariffs. They say that Trump's tariffs have hurt them by raising prices to levels that make it difficult for them to maintain their businesses. However, Congress appears to have stepped back and allowed Trump to declare tariffs. The problem, and maybe the only legal leg that Trump has to stand on, is that once Congress has handed this power over to the president, they can't get it back. Maybe they didn't know this, but maybe they did. And maybe they wanted Trump to create the tariffs in hopes it would turn things around. It's also possible they wanted Trump to take the blame if it didn't work. Anyway, it's not clear when the case will be decided, but if the tariffs are declared to be illegal, we may have to pay back $750 billion to the countries we have collected from. According to Trump, the real repayment figure would be closer to $3 trillion. This would come at a time when we could least afford it, probably late spring or early summer of 2026. It would shoot down Trump's entire effort to restore America and would also put a wrench in our relationships with other countries, especially if we could not afford to pay back the money. They would stop sending goods to us, and we might have to send them our goods without getting paid because we would owe them. Our debt keeps growing, and it looks like the 2025 annual deficit will be in the neighborhood of $2 trillion. It just boggles me that no one had the guts to stand up and address the budget the minute we began to run a deficit. Number 11. The people of New York City elected Zohran Mamdani. Wow. How could anyone have believed his promises of free bus transportation, free grocery stores, free rent, taxing the rich, and other childish, irresponsible fantasies? The residents of New York City need to grow up, and Mamdani will be a huge lesson for them. Number 12. Did you hear that Elon Musk has asked for a $1 trillion pay package? Oh, oh my holy smokes is all I can say. How big does the financial gap between rich and poor have to get before people wake up? If Musk doesn't get what he wants, he could resign and walk away from Tesla. And the board has been warned that he could leave the company. But I think such an outrageous pay package is more of a warning to us, the people. Do you see what our financial system has become? Do you see where it is headed? I fully agree that people should be rewarded for their work, their contributions, their leadership skills, etc. But when a few people have billions and billions of dollars while others starve or do not have water or electricity, it is a red flag that something is dangerously out of balance and will eventually tip over. Capitalism is good, but I think what we are seeing is no longer true capitalism. It has been distorted into end-stage socialism that pretends to still be capitalism in the same way that some males pretend they're women, some illegals are called immigrants, and debt is called wealth. It's all doublespeak. Socialism doesn't work. It has never worked, is never going to work, and we can slap as many labels on it as we can think of. But putting lipstick on a pig is still just a pig dressed up to fool you. Number 13. The problems people had with their travel plans during the shutdown highlights the fact that our world has splintered families dramatically. We now live thousands of miles away from one another, and yet we try to maintain a real connection by flying home for the holidays. I remember many, many articles in the 1960s and 1970s that talked about corporations ordering executives from one location to another every 2 or 3 years in order to break family ties and reestablish those ties as corporate ties with loyalty to the corporation and the needs of the business. They succeeded in that initial splitting, and iPhones did the final splitting. What happens to family if something interferes with either our travel systems or our freedom to travel or our ability to communicate? Have a backup plan in place. Number 14. Space weather has been pretty dramatic this past week, and I'm wondering how many of the ordinary folk understand that big solar energies hitting the Earth are the trigger for earthquakes. When you think of it, the sun hitting the Earth with a blast of solar particles is like an ocean wave hitting the shore with a blast of water molecules. In truth, earthquakes are a pretty ingenious way of shaking things up in order to keep things renewed and keep the Earth itself from becoming a dead, motionless rock. When I was a kid, there was always an attitude of, you're never going to be able to predict an earthquake. But this is no longer true. And there have been extraordinary gains in our understanding of the relationships between the sun, the moon, and the planets in our solar system. These relationships involve inconceivably massive power dynamics among plate tectonics, wind, and water that dwarf anything humans have at our fingertips. It is my hope that as we come to see and understand these dynamics, we will begin to re-engineer our world in ways that take into account our need for better construction methods and safer buildings, wiser locations for nuclear power plants, and building locations that offer more long-term security and safety from sudden earth movements or wind and water disasters. Number 15. The Ukraine war is such a painful, ugly thing to watch. Tens of thousands of soldiers are defecting every week. I read that the number of soldiers walking away, surrendering over the past few weeks was somewhere between 21,000 and 50,000 men. That is astounding. How can you fight a war when the soldiers don't want to fight? We've all seen the terrible videos of men being abducted from the street in Ukraine and forced to go into the army. They fight these abductions, but when the odds are 6 against 1, the guy on the street almost always loses. Are we finally reaching the maturity to say no to war? It reminds me of the question frequently heard in the 1960s. What if they gave a war and nobody came? At this point, Pokrovsk has fallen. Russia has set up a beachhead in Kherson. And because of this, some analysts say that Russia's going to go right on over and take Odessa, securing all the ports on the Black Sea that will give them access to the Atlantic Ocean by going through the Mediterranean. I see an end coming soon for Ukraine, but not till spring. Putin wants to make decisive moves now to end the war, to win the war. that will bring an end by spring, so that negotiations around borders and reconstruction can begin long before Trump's term in office is over. Putin does not want to be dealing with a set of unknowns, which is what would happen if the war were to drag on for another year or two before negotiations start. Number 16, 3I Atlas is moving ahead through our solar system and making waves in more than one way. It is so disheartening, though, to hear prominent scientists talk about it as if it were an alien ship, when everything it is doing is something that is normal behavior of plasma bodies. Scientists continue to refer to 3I Atlas as a comet, but comets are made of ice. And 3I Atlas is obviously not made of ice. Thus, when they exclaim, "Oh, it's not behaving like any known comet," yeah, they're telling the truth, because it's not a comet and they know it. They're lying. It's plasma. It is plasma that has developed into an unusually dense form of nickel and iron, something that is to be expected in an asteroid originating elsewhere in the universe. Not everything, people, not everything can be measured and judged and categorized as if it must fit what we know about the physical material on Earth. It's not from Earth. Why are we trying to impose our limitations on something that's not from here? So the size of 3I Atlas is huge, and the energy field around it is even bigger. This field could light up if given enough radiating juice to do so, and the sun has certainly provided some of that juice, which may be why the energy field around the object doubled in size when it got near the sun. Its acceleration and course changes can be explained by the magnetohydrodynamics that plasmas respond to, and to some extent by the fact that anything moving through space has to be moving as a result of the power of current interactions and magnetic flux. These interactions will have some impact on the body of the asteroid, and some of its material will sublimate, which is a change to another state. The change of water from a liquid to a gas is sublimation. It's a change to another state. So this process of sublimation is something that would result in color changes in the field around the asteroid, in much the same way that copper gives off a kind of a greenish light when it burns, because burning is also a change to another state. Many scientists are still talking about the fact that 3I Atlas is not moving according to gravity calculations, and it's 3 arc seconds off its original trajectory. Yes, that may be true, but it is not unusual or a sign of alien control. The problem here is that even though acceleration according to laws of gravity is a useful concept, gravity has been somewhat superseded by a broader and deeper understanding of plasma dynamics. Gravity is only one manifestation of a force that can pull things toward it, but can also push things away. Pushing is the other half of that manifesting force. In plasma dynamics, the whole asteroid could suddenly change directions by making a right angle turn and begin moving at a 90-degree angle to its original trajectory. or it could begin moving in spirals, or even go backwards. The bottom line here is that we should not be fooled by hints that it is watching us and it might be a dangerous alien ship. The only reason it would be dangerous is if it was on a collision course with our planet, and it's not. It's a wake-up call to the world of plasma dynamics. That's all. And that's a lot, I should add. Number 17. As we move into winter, it's getting cold. We had 8 inches of snow yesterday and the day before. As we move into winter, don't let the months go by without getting outside into the sun. You need the activity of the solar energies to energize the energy field of the body. Even if it's cold outside and you have to bundle up, if the sun is shining, go out and let the sun work at least some of its magic on your own energy field. You'll get a little bit of vitamin D on the face, but it's the activation of your field that is so valuable. Number 18, that $2,000 bonus check that Trump has said is a possibility for Americans reminds me of the COVID money pumped out to keep people quiet and subservient when the lockdowns started. There's something not right about that kind of talk. How can we be giving away money to people when we are $37 trillion in debt? Is that really Trump talking, or is somebody else pulling the strings? Crazy, crazy. Number 19. Artificial intelligence is an enormously useful tool. I cannot understand why people think it is going to take all of the jobs away. There are so many things that human intelligence can do so much better than artificial intelligence can. Why would we waste the great power of AI on the many things humans excel at? Things like taking into account the context of a situation, using our imagination, responding to personal preference or emotional bias that someone has, use of intuition, clairvoyance, and all the other clairs, remote viewing, respect for emotional boundaries, natural manners, politeness, a sense of humor, some thoughtfulness, a sense of timing, and age-appropriate responses. I think we should start using AI for the really serious calculations involving plasma field manipulations that would produce new building materials that are beautiful and need no maintenance, new forms of water, and new forms of useful energy. We should put AI to work to figure out the challenges of interdimensional communication and travel. Design and develop new infrastructure for supplying light, heat, and cooling. It could help design and develop new healing technologies that can reset an aging body to good condition. Create maps of energy flows in the solar system and beyond that will allow us to go exploring off planet. We can't even think about that without those maps. Design new cameras that can see and display the energy body. Create new diagnostic tools, or build mapping computers that predict the outcomes of interacting frequencies to the 100th generation. Wow. It could help create better technologies for communicating with those who have moved to the next world. We have some of those technologies, but they're kind of crude. Why not come up with radio, telephone, and television for people that have left this world and gone elsewhere. AI could design atomic arrays that allow new forms of metal deposition, thus creating whole new forms of metal and other materials. It could guide the development of tech projects that integrate well with intuitive and remote viewing efforts to map the frequency zones where compatible forms of life exist. There are so many possibilities. And we're probably going to learn to use AI the same way we learn everything, the hard way. Number 20. It was beyond me why the huge majority of people who were not paid during the government shutdown worried. Why were they worrying about paying rent, car payments, insurance, buying food, or struggling with questions about where are we going to live or what will we drive if they didn't get a paycheck soon? These worries and questions were a blatant display of thinking like a victim and believing you had no power. So I'm going to say this because the whole situation created by the government shutdown is going to happen again. And when it does, it may stay shut down even longer than this time. When it does, the first thing you must stop is acting like a victim. Stop telling yourself that you have to do what the authorities dictate. Where is your authority? If you are a decent human working a decent job and the government suddenly shuts down, cutting off income and leaving you dangling, it's not your fault or responsibility to fix or make up for the mess that someone else created. Shall I say that again? It's not your fault or responsibility to fix what someone else created. It is time to declare force majeure and recognize that the situation is beyond your control. All corporations and governments recognize force majeure as a legitimate explanation for things they cannot control. People can do the same thing because the fact is that not everything is under our control. In fact, very little is. Force majeure allows us to be relieved of blame or legal responsibility and to respond in ways that make sense in the situation. Make a new deal, make a new arrangement, make a temporary deal, something. Things may be beyond your control, but they're not beyond your ability to respond appropriately. So what is the appropriate response in the face of a shutdown or a government collapse? It is to stay put in your home. Do not vacate, and thus not add to the chaos and confusion going on in the world. Just stay put and quiet. It is to stop driving everywhere and only use your vehicle for emergencies. An appropriate response regarding your vehicle would be to have previously paid attention to the advice to never let the gas tank go below half full. And if a shutdown comes, put that car in the garage if you have one, or ask a friend or family member who has a garage if you can put the car in their garage and leave it until the money starts flowing again. That way, it's less likely to be confiscated by those who repossess vehicles and less likely to be stolen by unscrupulous people who keep an eye out for unattended vehicles. Appropriate responses regarding food would be to have already been smart enough to have at least 60 days worth of food stored. Why 60 days? Because 60 days is the length of time needed to grow some potatoes, carrots, peas, lettuces, tomatoes, corn, and other nutritious foods that will keep you going. Keeping the lights on can sometimes be managed by making partial payments from whatever money you have or your savings, and using at least one or two alternative sources, like a small generator that can be recharged using solar energy, or even battery lanterns or oil lamps in the evenings. Heat is another matter. A wood stove and a cord of wood is invaluable at times, but it's something that must be in place already. If you live in an area where it gets really cold, no amount of extra clothing can make up for the bone-chilling cold that begins creeping in as soon as the furnace stops. If you live in an area that becomes blisteringly hot, you're going to sweat. So this brings us to water. What is the appropriate response to the situation regarding water? Well, if your water is still on, bless the gods and then fill as many pitchers, jars, pots, and jugs as you can find. You may have to boil that water later if it sits for quite a while, or add a few drops of chlorine bleach, but you'll have some time to think about options, whether that's to collect rainwater, visit a creek to get water to flush the toilet, or use your charge card to have 5-gallon jugs delivered by a local company like maybe Culligan, or hook up a garden hose to your neighbor's outside faucet, or run the hose over to your house. Having at least a little water on hand gives you some time to think about what to do when it runs out. You'll quickly become aware of how much water you have wasted in the past. So, when the next shutdown comes, or the next natural disaster, you might want to ask yourself, have I been living in a fantasy land of illusions because I believed that the system would always take care of me? We have a civilized way of life because we have worked at it. Like giving birth and discovering that, children do not come with an instruction manual. Civilization and how to maintain it do not come with instructions either. It's us and our interests, abilities, creativity, common sense, and brains that keep a civilization alive and well. Number 21. I'll close by sharing something that happened last night. I was feeling bad about the slaughter of the 300 ostriches in Canada. So I tuned into them and told them, I'm so sorry for what happened. One of them replied and said, don't feel sorry for us. We died to save you humans. Get your heads out of the sand and look at what is happening to you. Because if you don't, you're next. I was shocked. That was so unexpected. When the brief communication was over, I was reminded again that in the same way the elephants sensed a huge threat and ran for the hills before that earthquake and tsunami hit Banda Aceh in December 2004, the animal world is much more aware of things than we think. They are paying attention to things that we are not. So, what is it that we're not paying attention to? I don't know. But I think it's time we did as the ostriches suggested and get our heads out of the sand. It could be another earthquake in that region of Canada, or it could be a war. It could be total capture or enclosure by forces with harmful intent, or something else. The message is, look at what is happening to us. I think we should ask and be honest with ourselves. Is this the kind of world we want? So that's it for this look-see. For those who are watching or listening for the first time, the look-see is a brief look at what is happening in our world and where the big trends are headed. Reality isn't fixed, it's dynamic, and it changes according to what we're doing with our consciousness. Nothing becomes real until we make it real. We make a choice, we take some kind of action, put something together, or take it apart. Those are the decisive actions that determine the path and the outcome. Of course, once we set something in motion, it takes a lot to make a change or get things going in another direction. And that's exactly the reason for looking ahead. If we don't like the direction things are going, we can make appropriate changes in a timely way. Or we can prepare for what looks inevitable. If we see something we like, we can put some conscious attention on that and help things along. It's important to look ahead and assess what is happening and where we are going so we know whether or not we need to do something different. So thank you so much for listening. I wish you all a happy Thanksgiving. Keep your eyes open and your wits about you. I'll see you in December. Take care.